Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the English podcast. I'm Ramya, and I'm so happy you've joined me today. Whether you're enjoying your morning coffee, preparing dinner, commuting to work, or simply relaxing at home, thank you for listening. Today, we're going to have a natural conversation about one of my favorite topics, food and cooking. Before I share my thoughts, I'd like to ask you a simple question. Who usually cooks at your home? Think about it for a few seconds. Is it your mother, your father, your grandparents, your partner? Or perhaps you're the one who prepares most of the meals? That's interesting. Every household has its own routine, and every family has its own traditions. Some people cook together every evening, while others take turns during the week. There isn't a perfect way to do it. What matters is enjoying the experience and appreciating the effort behind every meal. I never thought much about cooking when I was a child. To be honest, I simply walked into the kitchen whenever I felt hungry, and somehow a delicious meal always appeared on the table. I didn't stop to wonder how much planning, patience, and care went into preparing that food. As I became older, my perspective changed completely. I realized that cooking isn't merely about combining ingredients. It's about creating something meaningful. A simple meal can brighten someone's day, bring a family together, or even become a beautiful memory years later. Oh, really? Have you ever noticed that certain dishes remind you of a specific person or place? Perhaps the smell of fresh bread reminds you of your grandmother's kitchen. Maybe a bowl of soup reminds you of a rainy afternoon at home. Or a particular dessert brings back memories of birthdays and celebrations. Food has a remarkable ability to connect us with our past. Well, let me explain something I've learned over the years. People often believe that good cooking depends on expensive ingredients or complicated recipes. I don't think that's true. In my experience, the most memorable meals are often the simplest ones. A bowl of warm rice, fresh vegetables, homemade soup, or a perfectly cooked omelet can be incredibly satisfying when it's prepared with care. Of course, my own cooking journey didn't begin perfectly. Far from it. The first time I tried cooking by myself, I was convinced everything would turn out wonderfully. Unfortunately, reality had other plans. I added too much salt, forgot one important ingredient.
Let's be honest for a moment. When was the first time you cooked something completely by yourself? Maybe you were a teenager. Maybe you had just moved to a new city. Or perhaps you're still learning today. No matter when it happened, I think almost everyone remembers their first cooking experience. Mine certainly wasn't perfect. To be honest, I was excited, but I was also nervous. I kept checking the recipe every few seconds because I didn't want to make a mistake. I measured every ingredient carefully, watched the pan closely, and hoped everything would turn out exactly as planned. Well, let me explain. Cooking looks simple when someone else is doing it. You watch a family member prepare a delicious meal in 30 minutes, and you think, that doesn't look difficult at all. But the moment you stand in the kitchen by yourself, everything suddenly feels different. You start asking yourself questions. Should I cook this longer? Is the heat too high? Did I add enough salt? What if I burn it? Those thoughts are completely...
Now I'd like to ask you another question. If you could keep only 5 ingredients in your kitchen, what would you choose? Take a moment to think about it. Would you choose rice? Eggs? Tomatoes? Onions? Garlic? Fresh vegetables? Or maybe your favorite spices? That's an interesting question because everyone's answer is different. Our favorite ingredients often tell a story about our culture, our family, and the food we grew up eating. Well,
Let me explain. When I first started cooking, I believed that making delicious food required expensive ingredients. I thought I needed fancy sauces, special seasonings, and complicated recipes. But after spending more time in the kitchen, I discovered something completely different. The best meals are not always the most expensive ones. Sometimes the simplest ingredients create the richest flavors. I never thought about that until I started cooking.
Have you ever cooked with your family or your friends? If you have, I'm sure you know that cooking together is very different from cooking alone. It's not just about preparing food. It's about sharing time, conversations, and laughter. Some of my favorite memories were created in the kitchen. Not because the food was perfect, but because everyone was together. Someone was washing the vegetables. Someone else was cutting onions. Another person was stirring the soup. And of course, there was always one person who kept tasting the food every few minutes. Oh, really? I think every family has someone like that. To be honest, I enjoy those little moments much more than eating at an expensive restaurant. A homemade meal has something special that money simply can't buy. Well, let me explain. When people cook together, they naturally start talking. They share stories about their day. They laugh about old memories. They discuss future plans. Sometimes they even sing while cooking. Without realizing it, the kitchen becomes one of the happiest places in the house. I never thought about the kitchen this way when I was younger. Back then, it was simply a room where food was prepared. Now I see it differently. It's a place where relationships become stronger. It's where children learn family recipes from their parents and grandparents. It's where traditions are passed from one.
Let me ask you something. If you could travel anywhere in the world just to taste the food, where would you go? Take a moment to think about it. Would you choose Italy for its fresh pasta and pizza? Japan for its beautiful sushi? Mexico for its flavorful tacos? Thailand for its aromatic curries? Or perhaps France for its delicious pastries?
That's a difficult choice, isn't it? To be honest, one of my biggest dreams is to travel to different countries and experience their local food. I don't just want to visit famous restaurants. I want to explore small cafes, family-owned restaurants, and local street markets where people prepare recipes that have been passed down through generations. Well, let me explain. I believe food is much more than something we eat. Food tells a story. Every country has its own traditions, history, climate, and culture, and all of these things influence the way people cook. For example, countries with colder weather.
Here's another interesting question for you. Would you rather eat delicious street food or enjoy a meal at a fancy restaurant? That's not an easy decision, is it? To be honest, I think both experiences have something special to offer. A fine dining restaurant often provides beautiful presentation, elegant surroundings, and excellent service. Every dish is carefully prepared, and every detail is thoughtfully planned. It's an experience that feels calm, sophisticated, and memorable. However, there's something truly exciting about street food. Well, let me explain. Imagine walking through a busy market. You can hear people talking and laughing. You can smell freshly baked bread, grilled vegetables, roasted corn, and delicious spices filling the air. Vendors are preparing food right in front of you. The atmosphere feels lively and full of energy. Even before you take your first bite, the experience has already begun.
One of the things I admire about street food is its authenticity. Many street vendors have spent years perfecting a single recipe. Some recipes have been passed down through several generations. They may not have luxurious restaurants or expensive decorations, but they have something equally valuable: experience and passion. Oh, really? Have you ever noticed that some of the most unforgettable meals come from the smallest food stalls? Sometimes a simple sandwich, a bowl of noodles, or a freshly prepared snack taste far better than an expensive meal. I think that's because the food is made with dedication and pride. Thoughtfully, another advantage of street food.
Let's imagine something together. You're visiting a country you've never been to before. You walk through a busy street filled with small cafes, local bakeries, and family-owned restaurants. The air is filled with the wonderful aroma of freshly cooked food. People are laughing, talking, and enjoying their meals. Suddenly, you notice a restaurant that looks interesting. The menu is written in English, but many of the dishes are completely unfamiliar. What would you do? Would you order something you've eaten before? Or would you be brave enough to try something completely new? To be honest, I think I would choose the unfamiliar dish. Well, let me explain. Whenever we try something new, we open ourselves to new experiences. Sometimes we're surprised. Sometimes we discover a new favorite meal. And occasionally, we realize that a particular flavor isn't really for us. That's perfectly normal. I never used to be very adventurous when it came to food. I preferred ordering dishes that I already knew. It felt safe. I knew exactly what to expect. But after a while, I realized I was missing so many exciting experiences. One day, I decided to change that. Instead of choosing familiar meals every time, I started asking for recommendations. I would ask the waiter, "What's your most popular dish?" Or, "What would you recommend to someone visiting for the first time?" Believe it or not, those recommendations were often the best meals I had during my trip. Local people usually know which dishes truly represent their culture. Their suggestions helped me discover flavors I might never have chosen by myself. Oh, really? Have you ever asked a local person for a food recommendation while traveling? If not, I highly recommend trying it someday. You might discover a hidden restaurant that isn't mentioned in any travel guide. Sometimes the smallest restaurants serve the most unforgettable meals. They may not look luxurious, they may not have expensive decorations, but they often prepare food with incredible care and passion. I think that's what makes them so special. Food also teaches us to appreciate diversity. Every country has its own ingredients, its own cooking techniques, its own traditions, and that's something worth celebrating. Imagine a world where everyone ate exactly the same food every day. Wouldn't that be boring? Fortunately, Have you ever had a meal that you still remember years later? Not because it was expensive, not because it was prepared by a famous chef, but because it made you feel happy. I think we all have a memory like that. To be honest, the meals I remember the most aren't the fancy ones. They're the simple meals, shared with people I care about. Well, let me explain. A delicious meal isn't only about the ingredients. It's also about the people sitting around the table. You can eat the most ordinary food, but if you're surrounded by laughter, meaningful conversations, and genuine smiles, that meal becomes unforgettable. Have you ever noticed that food somehow tastes better when everyone is enjoying themselves? I don't know if it's science or simply happiness, but I think it's true. Sometimes, while eating together, nobody is looking at their phones. Everyone is talking. Someone tells a funny story, another person starts laughing.
Then everyone joins in. Before you know it, you've spent 2 hours at the table without realizing how quickly the time.
Let me ask you an honest question. When you're feeling tired, stressed, or emotionally exhausted, what kind of food do you usually reach for? Do you prepare a healthy salad? A bowl of fresh fruit? Or do you immediately start thinking about pizza, burgers, chocolate, ice cream, or your favorite homemade dessert? I think most of us have experienced that feeling. To be honest, there are days when all I want is comfort food. Not because I'm hungry, but because I want something that feels familiar and comforting. I never understood why that happened until I started paying more attention to my eating habits. Well, let me explain. Food doesn't only satisfy our physical hunger. Sometimes it also connects with our emotions. A warm bowl of soup on a rainy day. A cup of hot tea after a long afternoon. Freshly baked bread filling the kitchen with its wonderful aroma. These simple things can make us feel calm and relaxed. That's why they're often called comfort foods. Oh, really? What's your comfort food? Take a moment to think about it. Everyone has one. For some people, it's homemade pasta. For others, it's spicy noodles. Some people love chocolate. Others prefer a traditional family recipe that reminds them of childhood. Our comfort food is usually connected to happy memories rather than expensive ingredients. At the same time, I also believe healthy eating is incredibly important. Eating nutritious food gives us energy. It helps our bodies recover. It improves our concentration. And it allows us to feel more active throughout the day. Healthy eating doesn't have to be boring. In fact, colorful vegetables, fresh fruit, whole grains, beans, herbs, and homemade meals can be both nutritious and delicious. Sometimes people imagine that eating healthy means giving up everything they enjoy. I don't think that's true. Balance is much more important than perfection. If you enjoy a slice of cake during a celebration, that's perfectly fine. If you occasionally order your favorite pizza with friends, that's completely normal too. The key is making thoughtful choices most of the time, instead of trying to be perfect. Have you ever looked back and realized that a few small habits completely changed your daily life? I have. And surprisingly, many of those habits were related to food. To be honest, I used to think that healthy eating meant following strict rules. I believed I had to eat the same meals every day and avoid every single treat. That idea didn't last very long. Well, let me explain. The more I learned about nutrition, the more I realized that healthy eating isn't about being perfect. It's about making better choices consistently. One healthy meal won't completely transform your life, and one unhealthy meal won't ruin all of your progress. What truly matters is what you do most of the time. I never thought about it that way before. Instead of asking, is this food good or bad? I started asking, will this meal help me feel energetic and satisfied? That small change completely transformed the way I looked at food. Another habit I developed was eating more slowly. It sounds incredibly simple, but it made a huge difference. When we eat too quickly, we often don't notice how full we are. We finish the entire meal before our body has enough time to tell us that's enough. Have you ever experienced that? A few minutes after finishing your meal, you suddenly realize, I probably ate more than I needed. I think most of us have. Now, I try to enjoy every bite. I notice the flavors, the texture, the aroma, the temperature. Eating becomes an experience instead of just another task on my schedule. Oh, really?
When was the last time you enjoyed a meal without looking at your phone or watching television? It isn't always easy. We're surrounded by distractions: messages, videos, social media, notifications.
Have you ever been sitting at home doing absolutely nothing and then suddenly thought, I really want something sweet? Or maybe a hot slice of pizza sounds perfect right now. It's funny, isn't it? Sometimes we're not even hungry, yet we still feel like eating something. Why does that happen? Well, let me explain. There's a difference between physical hunger and food cravings. Physical hunger develops gradually. Your stomach starts to feel empty. Your energy begins to drop. You notice that it's time for a meal. Food cravings, however, are completely different. They often appear suddenly. One moment you're perfectly fine, and the next moment you're thinking about chocolate, ice cream, or your favorite snack. I never understood the difference until I started paying closer attention to my own habits. Now, whenever I crave something, I pause for a moment and ask myself, am I truly hungry? Or am I simply bored? Sometimes the answer surprises me. There are days when I realize I'm not hungry at all. I'm just looking for something to do. Other times, I discover that I'm feeling stressed, tired, or emotionally overwhelmed. And somehow, food seems like the easiest solution. Let's have a little fun. Imagine someone asked you a very unusual question. If you could eat only one meal for the rest of your life, what would you choose? That's much harder than it sounds. At first, you might say pizza, or maybe biryani, perhaps pasta, sushi, tacos, or your favorite homemade dish. But would you really want to eat the same meal every single day? I don't think I could. Well, let me explain. One of the greatest things about food is its variety. Every day gives us an opportunity to try something different. One day we might enjoy a light breakfast with fresh fruit. The next day we may feel like eating a warm bowl of soup. Sometimes we want something spicy. Sometimes we prefer something sweet. And sometimes a simple homemade meal is exactly what we need. I think our tastes change as we grow older. When I was younger, I cared mostly about whether the food tasted good. That was enough for me. Now I find myself thinking about much more than flavor. I wonder where the ingredients came from. I think about how fresh they are. I appreciate the effort that went into preparing the meal. And most importantly, I pay attention to how the food makes me feel afterward. I never imagined my relationship with food. Can I tell you a little secret? Even though I enjoy cooking now, I still make mistakes from time to time. And honestly, I think that's perfectly normal. No matter how experienced someone becomes, the kitchen always has a way of surprising us. One small distraction, one forgotten ingredient, or one extra minute on the stove, and suddenly everything changes. Well, let me explain. One evening, I decided to prepare dinner after a long and busy day. I was feeling confident because I had made the same recipe several times before. I thought, this will be quick and easy. So I started chopping vegetables, heating the pan, and preparing all the ingredients. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. The vegetables looked fresh. The spices smelled wonderful. The kitchen was filled with a delicious aroma. Then, my phone rang. I told myself, I'll answer for just 1 minute. Oh, really? You can probably guess what happened next. That 1 minute became 5 minutes. And while I was talking, I completely forgot about the food. When
I finally walked back into the kitchen, I immediately noticed a strange smell. At first, I thought, that doesn't smell quite right. Then I looked at the pan. Let's just say dinner was no longer dinner. It had become something that belonged in the trash. I couldn't stop laughing. Of course, I was disappointed. Nobody likes wasting food. But getting angry wouldn't change anything. So I cleaned the kitchen, took a deep breath, and started cooking again.
Have you ever invited your friends over for dinner and hoped that everything would be absolutely perfect? I certainly have. To be honest, whenever guests come to my home, I want them to feel comfortable. I start planning the menu a day or two in advance. I think about the drinks, the dessert, the music, and even how the table should look. Sometimes I spend more time planning than actually cooking. Well, let me explain. A few months ago, I invited a few close friends for dinner. I wanted to surprise them by preparing everything myself instead of ordering food from a restaurant. I was excited. I had chosen a recipe that looked simple enough, and I was confident that everything would go smoothly. The vegetables were chopped, the ingredients were neatly arranged on the kitchen counter, the table looked beautiful. Everything seemed to be under control. Then, something unexpected happened. One of my friends arrived much earlier than I had expected. I was still wearing my apron, my hair was a mess, and half of the meal was still cooking. Instead of pretending that everything was perfect, we both started laughing. My friend smiled and said, "Don't worry, tell me what I can do." That simple sentence completely changed the evening. Instead of cooking alone, we prepared the meal together. Another friend arrived and started setting the table. Someone else made fresh lemonade. Another person sliced the bread. Without planning it, everyone became part of the cooking process. I never imagined that asking for a little help could make the evening so much more enjoyable. While we were cooking, we shared funny stories from school, talked about our favourite travel experiences, and even debated which dessert was the best in the world. Believe it or not, we laughed so much that we almost forgot about the food. At one point, someone suddenly shouted, "The vegetables!" We all rushed toward the stove. Fortunately, nothing had burned, but it was definitely a close call. By the time dinner was ready, none of us cared whether everything looked perfect. The rice wasn't perfectly shaped, the salad wasn't arranged beautifully, the dessert wasn't exactly like the picture in the recipe. And honestly, none of that mattered. Everyone enjoyed the meal. Everyone asked for a second serving, and the conversations continued long after dinner had finished. That evening taught me something valuable. People rarely remember whether the food looked perfect. They remember how they felt. They remember the laughter. They remember the conversations. They remember feeling welcome. I think that's the truth.
Do you have a recipe that you could make again and again without ever getting tired of it? I think most of us do. Some recipes become part of our daily lives. Others become part of our family traditions. And a few become so special that every time we prepare them, they remind us of someone we love. That's a beautiful thought, isn't it? To be honest, I don't think a great recipe is only about the ingredients. It's about the memories attached to it. A simple meal can suddenly remind you of your childhood. The smell of freshly baked bread, the sound of vegetables sizzling in a pan, the aroma of spices filling the kitchen.
Sometimes those little things bring back memories that you haven't thought about for years. Well, Let me explain. Whenever I prepare one of my favorite homemade meals, I don't rush. I enjoy every step. I wash the vegetables carefully. I arrange the ingredients on the counter. I listen to the gentle sound of water boiling. I watch the colors slowly change as everything cooks. Cooking becomes peaceful. It's one of the few moments in the day when I completely slow down. No pressure, no hurry, just one step after another. Believe it or not, I even enjoy cleaning the kitchen afterward. I know, that probably sounds surprising, but I like leaving the kitchen clean and organized.
When everything is in its proper place, I feel ready for the next meal. I never imagined that cooking would teach me to become more patient and organized. It's amazing how everyday activities can quietly change our habits. Another thing I've noticed is that every person adds their own personal touch to a recipe. Even when two people use exactly the same ingredients, the final result is rarely identical. One person may add a little more spice. Another may cook it a little longer. Someone else may decorate the dish differently. That's what makes cooking so creative. Recipes give us guidance, but our personality brings them to life. Oh, really? Have you ever watched someone cook without measuring anything? They simply look at the ingredients, add a pinch of this, a handful of that, and somehow everything tastes perfect. I've always admired that kind of confidence. I hope that
Come to think of it, perhaps that's why family recipes are so precious. They're never exactly the same when someone else prepares them. Each generation keeps the tradition alive while adding something unique. The recipe evolves, yet the memories remain. I think that's something truly special. Food isn't only passed from one plate to another, it's passed from one heart to another. So, the next time you cook your favorite meal, don't focus only on the final result. Enjoy the entire process. Notice the colors, the aromas, the sounds, the little moments that make cooking such a rewarding experience. Because sometimes the happiest part isn't eating the meal, it's creating it. Before we finish today's conversation, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Have you ever stopped for just a few seconds before eating and thought about how that meal reached your table? I don't think we do that very often. Most of the time, we're busy. We're checking our phones, watching television, or thinking about the next thing we need to do. And without even noticing, the meal is over. I've done that too. But recently, I've been trying something different. Before I take my first bite, I pause for a moment. Not for a long time, just a few seconds. During that moment, I remind myself how fortunate I am to have a warm meal in front of me. Well, let me explain. Every meal has a story. A farmer planted the seeds and cared for the crops. Someone harvested the vegetables and fruits. Someone transported them to the market. A shopkeeper carefully displayed them. And finally, someone prepared the meal with patience and care. When I think about all those people, I realize that no meal happens by accident. It takes the hard work of many individuals. That's why I believe gratitude makes every meal taste even better. Not because it changes the flavor, but because it changes the way we experience it. Instead of eating quickly, we begin to appreciate every bite. We notice the freshness of the ingredients, the warmth of the food, the wonderful aroma rising from the plate, the conversation happening around the table.